Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. Hello, David Gouthro with Discover Fresh Perspectives, and today I'm with Carolyn Schur, and the fresh perspective we'd like to explore is around night owls and just what exactly those are, and just start that as a point of exploration. So, Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you, David. I'm
Now,
talking about night owls. I'll do it all the time.
So, Carolyn, what exactly is a night owl, and why is it important to understand the night owls?
So night owls are what we euphemistically call people who are late to bed and late to rise. And that's me. And it is a behavior. So you might know the opposite of night owls, which is early bird types. So early bird types go to bed early, get up early. There is another group called intermediates, but for today's purposes, we're talking about night owls. And so if we look at a continuum of sleeping and waking times, early birds would be at one end of that continuum, night owls would be at the other end. So that's basically night owls.
And so why do we need to understand them? I mean, what are the issues with night owls? How does that come into play?
Well, there are lots of issues with that, and it starts with the fact that our world is primarily designed for early birds. And so night owls really then find themselves challenged by that all the time. So just from my experience of being a night owl, and so let me just say, you were asking what are night owls? So these are not just behaviors that we learn. These are not just preferences that we have. Um, this is part of what we call circadian type. So, circadian type is actually a scientific term, and it refers to the fact that people have these different biological rhythms. They are genetically predetermined. So it is you were born one way or the other. We can mask it, and night owls are very good at learning to mask it to try to fit into an early bird world. But that's the problem is that because we live in a world designed for early birds, night owls really have to struggle to try to fit into that. And you either mask that behavior and try to be an early bird, much to your detriment, because that will affect your health and your well being. Or, like me, you say, no, I want to be authentic. And for my well being, it is more important to be a night owl. So the challenges are around, of course, that we have these views and these values that if you are a night owl, you're just lazy and undisciplined. And of course, you could get up early if you really tried. Um, so we're always struggling against these views and always having to find a way to say, no, it's not going to work for me to be at a meeting at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And no, I'd rather not have breakfast. I'd rather eat later.
And so you said that trying to mask this night owlishness can have health and wellness impact. So what kind of impact what we might see from someone who's genetically predisposed to be a night owl, but tries to mask it to fit in and try
Right.
to pretend to be an early bird?
So one of the first things that you'll see is that a night owl tries to be an early bird. So they're trying to get up early. The result of that is that they will be continually sleep deprived. And one of the first outcomes of long-term sleep deprivation is kind of a low-grade depression. So you lose your energy, you don't have energy, you don't have the same motivation, those kinds of things. In my case, trying to be an early bird really brought me to my knees, full-blown breakdown. Um, but for most people, it's just this constant feeling of not having energy, always being tired, kind of depressed. And that comes from the sleep deprivation because they are trying so hard to be an early bird. The other thing is that when you're masking, when you're trying to be something that you're not really, is it takes a lot of energy. So here you are, probably sleep deprived because you're having to get up earlier than would be your preference. Um, so you don't have much energy to start with, but now you have to use all this energy to say, "Oh yeah, I really was up at 7:30, but I just, you know." So that kind of emotional energy that goes into it.
So I'm just thinking of some organizations that run 7 by 24, and in order to be fair, I mean, and that could be healthcare. I've worked in the mining industry where clients say, in order to be fair, sometimes you work a morning shift, sometimes you work an evening shift, and some of those shifts work out really well for you because it works for what you're predisposed for. But in other cases, not. So, how do you deal with that where people are trying to be fair and shifting around when they actually work their day shifts and night shifts, but
Yeah.
they're predisposed towards either early birdishness or owlishness?
Well, it's interesting that you say about being fair, because our assumption of what is fair is actually not beneficial all the time, right? And so to say that, you're referencing a 24/7 workplace where you have these changing shifts, and so that's one place where most employers do not think about this at all. This is not on the radar at all. And it has been one of my missions is to say to employers, no, actually being fair means accommodating the different needs, the diverse needs of your workforce.
Right.
But this is also the case, and this is how I started all of this, was because actually in a 9 to 5 workplace is very much an issue. You have night owls who are consistently asked to find other opportunities because they are late for work all the time, even though that work may be 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And so my pitch has always been, to in order to gain the best performance from this employee who you've gone to the trouble of hiring and training and all of that kind of thing, you really do need to accommodate this preference that they have because if you need someone to be at the order desk at 7 o'clock in the morning, there's David or Jane or someone who would just, has already been up for an hour and a half and is more than willing to do that. But if you need someone to, do client calls at 6 o'clock and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. and 8 and 9 p.m., there's another group of David and Janes who are just more than willing to do that. And because they're at their highest performance levels. And so for an employer, I just always say, consider circadian type as a way to get the best performance out of your employees. And the advantage of that, of course, is that when you accommodate employees that way, they're more willing to stay with you. So you reduce that turnover level, you reduce that absenteeism level. Because as an employer, if you have someone who's a night owl who's struggling and is tired and not motivated and is being medicated for depression, I mean, that's costing you. And you could easily fix it.
So, how do you like if an employer wanted to be a little bit? I hate to use the term woke because they got so many, bad
Consider.
feelings around it.
That's
But
it.
if you wanted to pay
Consider.
attention to this sort of thing, how would you, reasonably accurately determine what a person's circadian rhythm is, or whatever you need to determine if they're a sort of a night owl
Oh,
or
yeah.
or
Okay. So actually, it's very easy. They're just, I have in my book, it's really just 2 or 3 questions that will just really tell you quite clearly. There are really a more accurate scientific ways of doing it, which is measuring body temperature. We can do it with a saliva swab, which is quite easy. Um, but in most cases, you don't want to do that. Frankly, the easiest way is just to ask people this one question is if you had the choice about what time you went to bed or got up in the morning or what time you went to work and just asking that question, Or just saying to people, do you feel more night owlish or more early birdish? Most people have that awareness.
Hmm.
Now, one of the things that will happen with night owls is because they're forcing themselves to fit into an early bird world. They'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm an early bird." But if you say to them, "If you had this choice, what would you choose?" And most people with a fairly high degree of accuracy will have some idea. Another good test is if you go on vacation and would you set up a game for 6 o'clock in the morning, whether you like golf or not? But, go skiing, whatever, hiking. Um, so most people will kind of go, "Oh, God, no way, right? Like I'm on vacation. I want to sleep in. I'll stay up all night long and do whatever." Because the one distinct factor with early birds is that they have what we call a high degree of circadian rigidity. So if they get up at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, they will get up at 5:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And it doesn't matter whether it's a work day, it's a Saturday, it's vacation or whatever. So those are easy ways that you can just, in simple conversation, really find out.
Like I'm just thinking of some of the spin-offs, the unintended consequences in some of this. And when I was working for Apple many years ago, there was a couple of managers that were always up like at 5 o'clock in the morning reading, sending emails and things like that. And also with an oil company, same kind of thing. And people felt that that was the standard that they had to keep up to if they were going to get ahead.
Right.
Right. And so I'm just thinking now, as we're talking, that maybe it wasn't so much that something they felt that they had to do. That's just when they operated best. But the consequences ripple through the organization.
Right. And so this is something that just increases the challenge for night owl types. Because as a society, we have this value that, if you're coming in at 6 or 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, man, you're a keener, right? Like you really care and you're such a hard worker and all of that kind of thing. And you're right. And so then that ripples through the organization and everybody then goes, "Oh yeah, well, they should be there at 7 or 7:30." I remember when this first really resonated with me. I was a manager in a company, and of course, that attitude pervaded, right? That everyone started work at 8 o'clock, and everybody was there at 8 o'clock, and I would struggle to get in at 9:30. So
Hmm.
of course, everybody was rolling their eyes at me as I was, rolling in. And what I always resented was everyone left at 4, but I left at 6, right? So no one was there to see that I was getting the work done.
Right.
My manager couldn't say that as a department, as a program, that we weren't achieving our goals. We were, and I was getting the work done, but no one saw. They only saw that I came in at 9:30. And I used to really resent it, but at that time I was already out. So I sort of didn't care. I I worked on the premise that tell me if my work is deficient, okay? And I will change that. But don't tell me that I need to be here at 8 o'clock with everyone else. Um, if you want me to be productive and you want me to get the work done, here's how I will do it. I was a good enough manager that I could get away with that. That's what I'm saying. For most other night owls, it would just be, no, we start at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock and you have to be here. And if you don't like it, well, too bad, you know?
And just thinking of the whole thing about FaceTime, thinking one of my banking clients many years ago, and people would come in early for sure, and as soon as the boss was gone, 30 seconds later, the place emptied because it was all about being seen. It wasn't about productivity. I
Yeah.
wonder about some other norms that we have in society where you have to earn your stripes by doing the night shift. Like I think of radio stations and things like that, where no, you do the midnight shift when there's next to nobody listening, but that's the way that you work your way up.
Right.
And I also think about with people that are trained as doctors and the length of the shifts that you work at and how you're expected to be, right on for that
Mhm.
entire time. Like when I'm scheduling an appointment with a doctor or a dentist, I talk to their, whoever is the person at the front desk and say, so when is he or she at their best, right? Because that's when I want to be there.
Right.
And if they're better late in the afternoon, I'm good for a late in the afternoon appointment. But if they've been working since 7 o'clock in the morning, I don't want them to go nearing whatever part of my body they're supposed to be working
Yeah.
on. It's
No,
crazy.
that is an amazing kind of intuitive understanding that people perform better at certain times of the day. And yeah, but we would want not just for David Guthro to have that understanding and that insight, right? We would like for every employer to have that understanding and that insight. But I don't want to be paying Carolyn to be here at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning when it's a total waste of time and energy, right? Um, Plus, I'm not going to be feeling well, so you're going to be paying for my third party health costs too, right? So if we could have that understanding, that insight, that people perform better at different times of the day. This is not news. This is not revelation. Everybody has a personal intuitive understanding of when they're better, right? Whether it is at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. Now, you were talking, I wanted to comment about this idea about earning your stripes and working through the night shift. There are lots of disadvantages to, or challenges, let's say challenges about being a night owl. One of the advantages is that from a societal perspective, we are more and more a 24/7 society. And night owls fit that need really well. And it's not even just working the entire night shift. It is, I've worked with casinos, for instance. A lot of casinos don't operate all night long, but they work till maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. So to have people who are willing to do that evening shift, even though it messes with family and personal life, but from a performance perspective, the night owl types are just generally better for that shift, and they love that shift. My most productive time is, kind of 9 or 9:30 p.m. to about 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So that shift is perfect for night owl types. Um, so that's kind of with night shifts. And given that I have worked with shift workers for almost 30 years now, what you will find is, if you generally kind of scan the workforce in any given workplace, you'll find a very small number of early bird types because they just cannot handle consistently night shift work. Um, so you'll find that, this idea that you have to earn your stripes working the night shift, um, in the same way that I can't tolerate 5 or 6 mornings of 7:30 in the morning, the early bird types cannot tolerate 5 or 6 nights of night shift.
I
So
just
they
think of
are the ones that will become ill.
I just think of all the different ways this impacts. So, if you're away at a conference, quite often they have, everyone's got to start at the same time. Right? So especially if it's a company conference, not an association conference, so you will be here at 7:30. That takes a toll. And you also mentioned families, and that hadn't occurred to me, the impact that can have on a family if everyone's got sort of a different orientation around that. My gosh, that can cause all kinds of stress and accusations if people don't understand that these are kind of built in. This is running through your DNA.
Yeah.
You're not doing it to
That
someone
was
else.
right, and so I've had really interesting experiences that other people have told me about in this regard. Um, I'm very blessed that my partner is someone who's kind of a, intermediate type that, tolerates the night owl stuff really quite well. But with my original book, there's a whole section on family relationships because the divorce rate, when you have mixed heights is very high. And it comes from the values that we attach to it, right? It doesn't come from you as a person or whatever. But when we see, so um, if I'm a night owl or if I'm an early bird type, is usually how it works. And my partner is a night owl type. And we kind of go, well, we enjoy garage sales on the weekend, right? So the early bird type is going to be like, oh yeah, 7 o'clock, we got to be out there because we got to get the deals, right? But the night owl partner is going like, no, there'll still be deals at 10 o'clock, right? So now the early bird type starts to say, well, um, number one, you're lazy because you don't want to get up and do this. Number two, and this is where it gets really dangerous, is you don't love me
Oh, geez.
because you won't come to do this with me, right? That just happens. And so we immediately go from this to making this judgment that it's all about whether you love me or not, rather than what is it that your body is telling you, right?
Wow.
And I was doing very long time ago a public talk about night owls. And after the presentation, a woman approached me and she's in tears. And she said, I think I'm going to be getting a divorce. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do with this? Because we're in a public place. On the other hand, I want to respect this woman's pain. So I said, well, just, what's happening? She went on just, very quickly to say, well, her husband doesn't love her. They've been married for, I don't know how long she said, but she's come to the conclusion that her husband doesn't love her and she's going to get a divorce or ask for a divorce. I said, well, what does it make? Do you think your husband doesn't love you? And here I'm supposed to be talking about night owls, but we're having this very intimate discussion. And she said, well, my husband just sleeps all day long and he doesn't want to do anything with me. And, this has gone on for years. And, so obviously sleep is, he doesn't care about me. He just wants to sleep. And I said, well, why is your husband sleeping all day long? And you know the answer. And she said, well, because he works nights all the time. And it just broke my heart. It just broke my heart. Because here is a woman who's, been in this relationship for years. This man has been doing night shift for years. So it's not like, we're 6 months into a relationship and I didn't know what this was going to be like, right? And I recite that story over and over and over because it it happens all the time, right? And so one of the things that I do when I'm working with shift workers is I say, okay, I am working with you as individuals to help you sleep better. But what is most important of anything that happens today is I want you to take that workbook and I want you to take whatever notes you got from today and I want it to cross the threshold at home because it is those people at home who need to know this. They need to know why you need to sleep, why you're sleeping during the day, and all this, kind of thing. So that applies to shift workers, of course, but it also applies to, people with 9 to 5 jobs when they are in these mixed relationships to understand that what their partner is doing has nothing to do with whether they love you or don't love you. It is simply their body expressing its own natural physiology. And, you know, figure out how you're going to deal with that because it's not going to change. And,
And
I may be able to, once a month make the sacrifice because I know it's very important for my partner. This is something, he loves to go sailing at 6 o'clock in the morning and it's beautiful sunrise, yada, yada, yada. Okay, once a month, I can do this because I do love you and I know that this is important to you and I can do this once a month. I can't do it every weekend.
So this is very interesting because I think about if I want to get a response back from my daughter, she's turning 24 this month, the best time to send it to her is midnight, like any other time. Forget about it because that's when she's fully alive. But and also, and maybe this is maybe I need some personal coaching and counseling here, Carolyn, because I'm oriented around the light. So if it's dark, I'll roll over and go back to sleep. When it's light, I'll get up ready to go. And because I love what I do, I can quite often work till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I have no idea what time it is because I'm loving it. But
Mhm.
how does and I think too when I've worked in the Northwest Territories, where in the summertime it just doesn't get dark, right? And I'm curious how you deal with things like that where it's light oriented, because I imagine that has a magnifying effect or an influence on what your natural tendency is to be a night owl or an
Right.
early bird.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Light is very consequential because it is what keeps us what we call entrained to a 24-hour cycle. You have actually the opposite happening where you're saying in northern climates where you have these extended hours of daylight. What ends up happening, well, number one, is very difficult to sleep. So you have to take extraordinary measures to make sure that you are able to sleep because light is one of the things that promotes alertness. And so for shift workers coming home after night shift, that is one thing that we have to work at is how do you minimize light so that you're still able to go home and sleep. So in the northern territories or countries where you have extended daylight, so the opposite happens is that, as I said, you have to take extraordinary measures to make sure that you can sleep. But it also has a very strong mental effect. And so what you'll find is that people become hyperactive, like they become overstimulated, and in the extreme, they can become psychotic because it's just so overwhelming for them. That's an extreme. But for many other people, it just has this kind of think of a word. It tends to for you to become a bit somewhat more hyperactive, that kind of thing, harder to settle down for sleep because you're being so overstimulated by the light. So in the same way that we have in northern climates as well, where we have the longer um, nights or less daylight, shorter days, where people are subject to what's called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, because they are getting less light. And so that, makes them more kind of emotionally depressed. Where you have the long days, then you get this kind of emotional overstimulation.
Okay. So solve that problem, Carolyn. No, don't do that. so, so this has been very, very fascinating, very helpful to me, I know. And I'm going to put the name of your book, if it's still available, in
Yeah.
the show notes. And I'd like to thank you very much for being here today and providing a fresh perspective on sleep and night owls and early birds, that they're not good or bad. They're things to take into consideration as we plan our work and our lives.
Right. Yeah.
So this has been David Gouthro with yet another Discover a Fresh Perspective with Carolyn Schur, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks for listening. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.